Nearly a quarter of kids in America grow up in single-parent homes. That's a lot for one person to handle. School runs, homework, dinner, single parents juggle it all. But sometimes you need more than just a helping hand. What happens when you need someone to fill a bigger role? What happens when you need a dad? Dads are more than just helpers. They're role models, confidants, and protectors. They teach us life skills, share laughs, and offer comfort after a tough day. They're there for graduations, but also for silly jokes and hugs. But what if you've never had a dad, or if he's not around anymore? Can you ever really fill that missing piece? Imagine scrolling through profiles searching for a father figure. Need someone to teach baseball or give a wedding speech? There's a dad for that. This is the story of a man who becomes a fake dad for two kids who need one. Can he really fake it? Or will family prove more complicated than he imagined? Get ready for a hilarious, heartwarming journey into what it means to be a dad. Max was hardly father material, a struggling actor with a chaotic life. One night, desperate for work, he stumbled on an ad-seeking father figure. Must enjoy board games, bad jokes, and bedtime stories. He almost ignored it, but curiosity, and the promise of free meals, got the better of him. Max sent a half-hearted application, never expecting a reply. Days later, an email arrived that made him spit out his coffee. Suddenly, Max was in the running to be a fake dad. He had no idea what he was getting into, but his life was about to change. The interview was surreal. Max, in his least wrinkled shirt, felt out of place in Sarah's pristine apartment. Sarah, poised and kind, asked why he'd be a good fit. Max mumbled something about patience, feeling like a fraud. Then, two kids appeared. Emily, 6, with bright red glasses, and Ethan, 8, shy and quiet. "Is he the pizza guy?" Emily asked, eyeing Max suspiciously. Sarah introduced the kids. This was why Max was here. He realized this wasn't just a job. It was about becoming part of their lives. Sarah was a single mom doing her best for Emily and Ethan after their dad left. Emily was full of questions about her dad. Ethan had grown quiet and withdrawn. Sarah wanted a positive male role model for them. Max, despite his doubts, felt empathy. He knew what it was like to feel a void. The kids weren't thrilled about a fake dad. Emily tested Max at every turn. Ethan watched him with quiet suspicion. Max realized this would be anything but easy. Max agreed to the arrangement, maybe for the paycheck, maybe for something more. His first day board games and dad jokes met with groans and skepticism. "You're really bad at this," Emily declared. "A real dad would know how to make pancakes." Max was officially on dad duty. Breakfast was chaos. Max's pancakes were a disaster, too fluffy, too burnt. Ethan poked at them, unimpressed. Emily demanded smiley faces. Max tried, failed, and surrendered to the mess. "Let's order pizza," he sighed, defeated. The kids laughed, and for a moment the tension eased. Max realized being a dad wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, even when you flop. And sometimes pizza is the answer. Hoping to redeem himself, Max took the kids to the park. Ethan turned into a daredevil. Emily fed pigeons and charmed strangers. A rogue frisbee nearly caused disaster, and Max found himself out of his depth. "Hey, old man, watch it!" a teen called, making Max feel every bit the imposter. He realized he wasn't a real dad, but he was trying. The kids noticed, and that mattered. Emily's school play was looming and disaster struck. Her tree costume was ruined. Emily was devastated. Max scrambled for a solution. He found his old gladiator costume and pitched a new idea. "Be a warrior tree!" Emily's tears turned to excitement. She took up the plastic sword ready to defend the forest. Max learned that sometimes creativity saves the day. The play was a hit. Emily beamed, proud to be the fiercest tree on stage. Weeks passed, and Max settled into the family's rhythm. He learned Ethan loved astronomy. Emily craved connection. One night, Ethan pointed out Orion's belt, sharing memories of his real dad. Max listened, knowing he couldn't replace Ethan's father, but he could be there, offering support and a new perspective. Sometimes being present was enough. And slowly, trust grew. Sarah decided it was time for a family portrait. Max, nervous, found himself swept up in the chaos. The kids made faces, struck poses, and turned the shoot into a comedy. But in a rare quiet moment, Emily leaned on Max's shoulder, Ethan smiled, and the photographer captured it. For a second, they looked like a real family. Max realized he'd become more than just a stand-in. He belonged, and that felt real. At the carnival, Max faced his fears and embraced his new role. He rode the Ferris wheel with Emily, cheered Ethan on at the ring toss, and even told a few dad jokes. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. Emily giggled, Ethan groaned, and Max felt a little more like a real dad. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that was enough. Teaching a kid to ride a bike is practically a rite of passage for any father figure. It's a moment etched in countless family photo albums and home videos, a testament to patience, perseverance, and the occasional scraped knee. For Max, though, the prospect of teaching Ethan how to ride a bike was less about heartwarming memories and more about potential liability issues. Ethan, desperate to ditch his training wheels and join the ranks of the so-called big kids, had been begging Max for weeks to take him to the park for a bike riding lesson. Max, who honestly hadn't ridden a bike since he was 10 years old and still had the scars to prove it, had been skillfully dodging Ethan's requests, coming up with everything from bad weather to, an imaginary flat tire on his own non-existent bike. But eventually, Max just ran out of excuses. Armed with a helmet for Ethan, not for himself, a first aid kit just in case, and a healthy dose of apprehension, Max found himself standing on a grassy knoll in the park, watching as Ethan wobbled precariously on his two-wheeler. "Just keep pedaling," Max called out, his voice a mixture of encouragement and honestly, a bit of panic. "And don't forget to look where you're going." Of course, Ethan, his brow furrowed in concentration, ignored Max's advice and promptly steered the bike straight into a bush. Life, as it tends to do, threw a curveball Max's way just as he was starting to get comfortable in his role as a fake dad. It happened on a Tuesday evening, you know, the kind of ordinary evening that lulls you into a false sense of security. Max was helping Emily with her math homework, his frustration mounting with each passing minute. Who knew fractions could be so complicated? When the phone rang, it was Sarah, her voice frantic and filled with worry. "Max, it's Ethan. He fell off the monkey bars at school. I'm at the hospital. Can you please bring Emily?" The drive to the hospital was a blur of adrenaline and anxiety. Emily, sensing the urgency in Max's voice, sat quietly in the back seat, clutching her favorite teddy bear, her small face etched with worry. As Max pulled up to the emergency room entrance, his heart pounded in his chest, a strange mix of protectiveness and fear just washing over him. The sight that greeted him in the waiting room did little to ease his anxiety. Sarah, her face pale and drawn, sat hunched over in a chair, her hand tightly gripping Ethan's. Ethan, his arm in a sling, looked pale and shaken, but his eyes lit up when he saw Max and Emily. "Hey, little dude," Max said, forcing a smile as he approached Ethan's bedside. "What happened?" Ethan, his voice small, explained how he'd been trying to impress his friends with a new trick on the monkey bars when he lost his grip and fell. "I think I broke my arm," he whispered, his lower lip trembling. The incident at the hospital brought Max and Sarah closer together. There was a shared sense of relief, of gratitude that Ethan's injuries weren't more serious. In the aftermath of the accident, Max found himself spending more and more time with the Miller family, his initial awkwardness replaced by a comfortable familiarity. He helped Sarah around the house, tackling tasks like grocery shopping and laundry with, honestly, surprising competence. He even managed to fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom, much to Sarah's amazement, and his own. He'd become an integral part of their lives, a fixture at family dinners, school events, and even the occasional impromptu dance party in the living room. But, amidst this newfound harmony, a secret lingered. A truth that Max had been keeping hidden. A truth that threatened to unravel the delicate balance he'd created. Max wasn't who he said he was. He wasn't a struggling actor who'd stumbled upon a father-figure job posting. He was, well, that's a story for another time. The weight of this secret pressed down on Max, casting a shadow over his newfound happiness. He'd grown to love Emily and Ethan, to truly cherish the moments they shared, the laughter, the arguments, the quiet evenings spent reading bedtime stories. The thought of hurting them, of betraying their trust, filled him with a sense of shame. But the longer he kept the truth hidden, the more tangled the web of his lies became. He found himself making up elaborate stories, dodging phone calls, and avoiding certain topics of conversation, his anxiety growing with each passing day. One evening, as Max was helping Emily build a pillow fort in the living room, Sarah approached him, her expression serious. "Max, we need to talk," she said, her voice unusually quiet. "There's something you need to tell me." Max's heart skipped a beat. Had she somehow discovered his secret? Max's carefully constructed world began to crumble around him faster than a poorly built sandcastle. Sarah, it turned out, hadn't discovered his deepest, darkest secret, at least not yet, but she had stumbled upon something that chipped away at the foundation of their arrangement. Remember that disastrous attempt at making pancakes? The one that ended with a smoke-filled kitchen and a desperate call for pizza delivery? Well, it turns out Emily, in her infinite wisdom, had decided to document the entire culinary fiasco on Sarah's tablet, creating a hilarious albeit slightly embarrassing video montage set to the tune of Burning Down the House. Sarah, initially amused by her daughter's filmmaking skills, soon noticed something peculiar in the background of one of the clips. It was a framed photo, partially obscured by a stack of cookbooks, a photo that Sarah had never seen before. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and, a mother's intuition, she decided to investigate. One Google search later and Sarah found herself staring at the face of the man she knew as Max. A man who, according to his online profile, was not a struggling actor but a highly successful lawyer? "Max," Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly, "I found something online, something that doesn't quite add up." Max's heart sank. He'd known this day would come, had dreaded it, in fact. He'd rehearsed this conversation in his head countless times, imagining the hurt in Sarah's eyes, the disappointment in Ethan's, the betrayal in Emily's. The words caught in Max's throat, a tangled mess of guilt and shame. How could he explain the unexplainable? How could he confess to Sarah, to the kids, that the man they'd welcomed into their home, the man who'd shared their meals, their laughter, their secrets, was nothing more than a carefully constructed facade? He looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw the trust he'd betrayed reflected in her eyes. He saw the confusion in Emily's face, the way she clutched her teddy bear a little tighter, as if she was seeking comfort from the storm brewing around them. And Ethan, ever perceptive, his gaze fixed on Max, a silent question just hanging in the air. I'm not, Max stammered, each word a painful admission of his deceit. He wanted to tell them everything, to explain why he'd done it, to beg for their forgiveness. But the words wouldn't come, replaced by a jumbled mess of excuses and justifications that sounded hollow even to his own ears. Sarah, her patience wearing thin, leaned forward, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt. "Max, what is going on? Who are you?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. Max knew he couldn't hide any longer. The truth, like a caged beast, was clawing its way out, and honestly, there was no stopping it now. I'm not an actor," Max finally confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm a lawyer, a corporate lawyer. And the reason I answered that ad, it wasn't what you think." The words tumbled out, each one chipping away at the foundation of their fragile family. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief, her gaze fixed on Max, a storm of emotions brewing beneath the surface. Silence descended upon the room, thick and suffocating. Emily, sensing the tension, buried her face in her teddy bear, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Ethan, his usual stoicism replaced by a look of raw hurt, stared at Max, his eyes filled with a betrayal that cut deeper than any blade. Sarah, struggling to process this bombshell, rose from her seat, her voice shaking with barely suppressed rage. "A lawyer? You've been lying to us this entire time? Why, Max? Why would you do this?" Each question felt like a blow, shattering the fragile remnants of their trust. Max closed his eyes, bracing himself for the storm. There was no justifying his actions, no excuse that could erase the hurt he'd caused. I was hired to get close to you," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "By your ex-husband." The revelation hung in the air, a toxic cloud casting a dark shadow over everything. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Richard, what are you talking about?" Max took a deep breath, the weight of his confession pressing down on him. He told them everything. How Richard, Sarah's ex-husband, had hired Max to get close to Sarah, to gather information, to find a way to discredit her in their ongoing custody battle. How Max, initially motivated by the hefty paycheck and the challenge of the case, had found himself drawn to Sarah, to the kids, to the warmth and chaos of their unconventional family. How he'd allowed himself to forget, even for a little while, that it was all a lie, a carefully crafted performance for which he was being paid handsomely. The truth had set him free, but at what cost? Sarah's eyes were full of betrayal. Emily's tears fell silently. Ethan's gaze was cold and accusing. "Get out," Sarah said, her voice empty. "Get out of our lives." Max wanted to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but the words wouldn't come. His heart heavy, he turned away. Max walked to the door, each step echoing his regret. He had come as a stranger and left as a man who'd lost everything. The click of the lock as the door closed behind him was like a death knell, signaling the end of a chapter in his life. As Max walked away from the only home he'd ever known, the weight of his actions pressed down on him. Even the warm glow of the streetlights couldn't penetrate the darkness that had settled over him. He'd stepped into the role of a father figure with a script in hand, ready to deliver his lines. But he'd forgotten to listen to his own heart, which had found its way back to life in the most unexpected of places. A crumpled drawing from Emily, stick figures, my family in crayon, reminded him of what he'd lost. He'd been blinded by ambition and fear, seeking redemption in all the wrong places. True redemption, he realized, is earned through honesty, accountability, and the courage to face your actions. The road ahead was uncertain, shrouded in a fog of regret and the lingering hope for a second chance. Max knew he had a long journey ahead of him, a journey to reclaim his own humanity, to atone for the pain he'd caused. He couldn't erase the past, couldn't rewrite the script he'd so carelessly followed. But maybe, just maybe, he could use his experience, his mistakes, to forge a new path, one paved with honesty and integrity. He couldn't force Sarah, Emily, and Ethan to forgive him. That was a choice they had to make on their own terms, in their own time. As he walked, the rhythmic sound of his footsteps against the pavement, a steady beat accompanying his thoughts, Max made a decision. He wouldn't run from his past, wouldn't seek solace in the familiar comforts of denial and self-destruction. He would face the consequences of his actions, would strive to be a better man, a man worthy of the love and trust he'd so carelessly thrown away. The road to redemption, he knew, was long and arduous, but with each step he took, with each breath he drew, Max clung to the faintest glimmer of hope, a hope that someday, somehow, he might find his way back to the people who had shown him the true meaning of family. What do you think? Can Max ever truly earn back their trust? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more stories about unexpected families and second chances, be sure to check out my other video on